community transformation, we're helping people living in extreme poverty to realise they are not without hope. They have purpose, significance, skills and resources that they can use to lift themselves out of poverty. And this realisation comes through Bible studies run by the local church. As people realise that they have more than they thought they did, what they have been blessed by God beyond their recognition, they're filled with hope and begin to plot their way out of poverty alongside their neighbours. I'd like to show you a video now. This was taken from a recent trip to Burundi and illustrates the power of church and community transformation when a community commits to its principles.
Hi, my name is Helen, and I recently had the privilege of going to Burundi to see the work that Tearfund is doing with local churches there. On our first day, we took a trip into the mountains to visit a village called Mubira. It's only 20 kilometers from where we were staying, but it took us over an hour to get there because the road was so rough and bumpy. When we arrived, the whole community was there to welcome us, and we were greeted by Pastor Obed. He described to us what life was like in the community before and the various challenges they faced. Tearfund's Bible study training changed all that. The church members started to realise that everything God had already given them could then be used to help the whole community. The main challenge that Mubira faced was the lack of access to healthcare. The nearest health centre is 11 kilometres away down that bumpy road that I described at the beginning. Can you imagine having a medical emergency, being pregnant, being in labour, and having to sit on the back of a motorbike going down a road like that? The church was inspired by one part of the Bible studies that Tearfund uses as part of the training. Nehemiah 2, verses 10 to 20, when Nehemiah decides to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. They realised that when they come together as a community, as a church, that they could pool their resources. They raised £30,000 to be able to build their own community health centre right there in the middle of Mubira. When I was there, they had just finished building the health centre and had piped water up from the other side of the mountain so that it had running water. And I've heard that 6 months on, they're planning to put solar panels on the roof to provide electricity. Pastor Obed's church has doubled in size and he has to build a new one. In fact, they're having to plant new churches in that area because people are coming to faith. They showed us with pride their community health centre that they had built with their own hands. Mubira is just one example of how Tearfund is equipping churches to transform their communities. We simply couldn't do it without the support of churches like yours. We're so grateful for all of your support and prayers. Thank you.
Now, as that video shows, Tearfund does not do the work for or on behalf of the community. Tearfund simply provides training for the church leaders on how to run the church and community transformation studies. The church then runs the studies. The church then runs the studies for everyone in the community who wishes to attend. As the groups meet to study the Bible, individuals discover their purpose, their significance, their skills, resources, and their potential as people created by a loving and powerful God. When this happens, answers to the community's biggest challenge begin to be found and implemented. Or put another way, as the old adage says, give a man a fish and he eats for a day, but teach a man to fish and he can feed himself for life. So what's your role? In our reading from 2 Corinthians 8, Paul encourages the church at Corinth to give from what they have, not what they don't have. Starting with verse 11, now finish the work so that your eager willingness to do it may be matched by your completion of it, according to your means. For if the willingness is there, the gift is acceptable according to what one has, not according to what one does not have. Our desire is not that others might be relieved while you are hard pressed, but there might be equality. At the present time, your plenty will supply what they need, so that in turn their plenty will supply what you need. The goal is equality. As it is written, the one who gathered much did not have too much, and the one who gathered little did not have too little. It's pretty obvious that we don't live in an equal world. In January, Oxfam published their Survival of the Richest report, which states, during the past decade, the richest 1% had captured around half of all new wealth. This is not an equal world. At Tearfund, we use the phrase, poverty is not God's plan. You are. We, as the Church in the West, the institution and the individual, have the opportunity, responsibility and privilege to partner with God in what he is doing to build his kingdom. How do we, the Church, do this? One way is by prayer. Tearfund's country director, Helen, in the DRC, or Democratic Republic of Congo, says prayer changes things on the ground. We should never underestimate the power of our prayers. And I must say, on a personal note, Hebdavi lives in Goma, which was overrun by the M23 terrorists some short while ago. And thanks be to God, all of our staff were safe. But he still sees prayer as changing things in Goma. And that's so positive. The Bible is full of examples of answered prayer and encouragements to pray fervently and continuously. We know that prayer changes things, which is why prayer is the heart of all we do at Tearfund. I'm pleased to say that during this past week, we took a day out from our normal work to spend 24 hours in prayer as a company together, meeting all our other colleagues around the world. And for 24 hours, we prayed together. And as Tearfund does this regularly to make sure that we're following God's plan and that God is at the heart of all that we do. But our prayers are meant to be bold and aspirational, faith-filled, asking God to do something bigger than we can do on our own. However, our responsibility doesn't end with prayers of faith, because we all know, as it says in James 2, that faith without action is dead. Instead, our prayers should lead us into action, knowing that God is leading us where we are going, preparing the way before us and empowering us to accomplish his purpose. That's why we're running a campaign called Practice What You Pray. Because in addition to prayer, we give. And if we believe in the transformation power of the local church, then we can see how our giving contributes to the effective healing of those 4 broken relationships we discussed earlier. When the relationship between us and God is restored, we can see ourselves as purposeful creatures of a loving, powerful, and gracious God. We realise that we are not defined by our poverty, but by his generosity. His generosity, which is demonstrated through the gift to us of Jesus, and the ongoing gift of his Spirit in us. When this relationship is healed, all of the other broken relationships can more easily begin to be restored as well. Thus, the 4 broken relationships begin to be healed, and the people are lifted out of poverty, both spiritual and material. In our video from Burundi, the community was able to raise over £30,000 on their own in order to build their own health centre. They then, on their own, managed to pipe water from the bottom of the hill to the top, so the health centre had running water. Because the inspiration for the project came from experience in the church and community transformation Bible studies, the result was that the church grew as well, requiring a bigger building and more churches to be planted. And this is why Tearfund is passionate about the local church and its ability to end extreme poverty. Meeting Jesus is only the beginning of the journey. A local church provides the community we all need to make the most of that journey personally and communally. So, is it clear what Tearfund's role is in this transformational process? The film that accompanies our Practice What You Pray campaign helps identify the role that Tearfund plays. And it might surprise you how small but significant that role is. Let's watch this 60-second video.
This is Burundi in Africa, and this is Cecile, who's walking to fetch water for her family. Oh, okay. Well, then what's in the bucket? This is the school that your donations built, brick by... Oh, then who built it? Of course. Your generous donation. This is the centre of the community that your donations... No, it's not, is it? Okay, what did Tearfund do? Oh, that's much more helpful.
That short film we just watched features Cecile, a 28-year-old wife and mother of a 1-year-old child. Cecile lives in Burundi, has gone through the Bible study training at the local church, and she and her husband are farmers, and this training opened our eyes to the opportunities within and around them. Cecile's story helps us to illustrate how poverty is often about perspective, of what you believe to be true, rather than the reality of what is true, and when you can change your perspective to God's perspective. In Romans 12:2, we are encouraged to renew our minds, because what we think reveals what we believe to be true. So if we can change what we think, we can change what we do. What I hope you found refreshing about that film is that we're not just focusing on needs around the world, instead we're focusing on what God is doing through the local church and the impact that it's having. Cecile, featured in this video, has experienced what a change in thinking can mean for her future sustainability. It's quite exciting. At Tearfund, we genuinely believe God has shown us a remarkable way to transform the lives of countless millions of people living in poverty. Tearfund is currently partnering with 25,000 churches in over 50 countries around the world. Our vision is to roll out church community transformation to 250,000 churches in the next 7 years. But we can't do this alone, and we need your help. As I mentioned earlier, this model of church and community transformation releases enormous potential. Our prayer at Tearfund is that the UK church will have a mindset of abundance. We know that we can be difficult times like this, but we also know that we serve a big and generous God. What we are seeing is that God is doing what he always does when we give sacrificially to him. He multiplies the gift. If we think about the feeding of the 5,000, Jesus didn't feed the crowd out of nothing. He fed them through the sacrificial gift of a child's lunch. The multiplication being experienced through our church and community transformation model far exceeds this gift. Every £1 invested by Tearfund in local churches helps the community to unlock a further £7 in time and resources for shared projects, which ultimately creates £211 of social value in terms of improved well-being. Where else can you see £1 transformed into 211? Over a year, £6 a month would deliver CCT training to community through the local church. £12 a month could deliver CCT training to 2 communities. £25 a month could train 10 local church members to run a community transformation program every year. I'd like to invite you to partner with us in this work and give to Tearfund today. Will you sign up to give £12 a month this morning? It could provide CCT training to 2 communities to help them overcome extreme poverty. When you give to Tearfund, you're giving to the flourishing of individuals and the church. If you feel led to support this work, I'd like to encourage you to fill in the forms on your seats, and you can hand it to me at the end of the service. And I also hang around if you'd like to chat to me and learn more about Tearfund's work. But I thank you once again for the invitation to come and speak here today. And I hope you found some of this interesting. Thank you very much.
I want us to do something before we enter into a time of just worship, if you can please. I want us to pray for the work of Tearfund, not only in Burundi, but wherever God has Tearfund work. And we want to pray that work like this. I think it's amazing work because it's not, I think if you can see the genius of that film was that it's not that you're giving, it's that you're building for them, but they're being equipped so that they can now do things themselves. So they're able to use the gifts and wisdom that God has given them as well. And that makes the work that makes the giving actually much easier in one sense, because they're able to sustain in that sense themselves by the wisdom and grace of God. So I want us to pray for that work that's going on. I want to pray that God will bless the work of Tearfund and increase that work as well, that they'll go beyond what their actual what they were aiming for in the next 7 years, that they'll go beyond that and they'll reach more, and that their work will be very significant for generations to come. So if we can please stand. And this one, I'm going to ask that we all open our mouths to pray at the same time. So we want to lift up our voices to pray to God and lift them up. And then what I'll do after that is then that I will then just do a simple closing prayer, and then we'll continue our worship to God. So let's lift up our voices to God all together. Let's pray to God and ask God that God will